So, part 6, my situation. I hope by now you have an idea of the background that I've presented with my life, with uh, my upbringing, the religious background, uh, and the state of Utah. Now we're going to tie them all together into what happened to me when I moved to Utah. And it'll show you just how dangerous Trump is to our nation. Because what happened to me is a result of the alt-right conservative thinking process. And people are already experiencing it to a small degree, but you have not yet seen what Utah already has implemented for a traditional practice here in Utah, as Trump will be doing throughout the whole United States and throughout the world. And that is the big warning. So pay attention to this video because this is the danger that we are all in. Whether you're alt-right, whether you're left, whether you're none, like I am. Okay, so I graduated from the University of Lethbridge in Canada. Free healthcare, free babies. They pay you to have kids. They pay you if you're poor. They take care of their people in Canada. And yet the alt-right conservative thinking is to demonize taking care of the people. That's what they do when they say Canada is socialist. We need to oppose socialism. We don't want people to be taken care of, is what they're really trying to tell us when they tell us that Canadians are evil and that socialism is evil. Because Canada, their economy actually has adopted the United States' system. They really don't have a socialist economy. The government just pays for certain things such as medical and welfare. But you know, Canadians still have to go to a grocery store to buy food. They have big box stores. They had Zellers when I was there. That's what it was called. And then they had a big, I can't remember what it was, but when trucks get into an accident, they can't sell the products to the stores or through the stores. So the products then get bought by this company and they sell it through their store as damaged and rejected goods. And so most of it is good quality. It's just the law in Canada that you can no longer sell those products that were involved in an accident. And so we have big box stores as well. So there's really no difference. What was interesting, and it may be practiced here in the United States, but in Canada they had grain silos where the farmers would bring their harvest and the different flour companies would go to those silos and pay to bring their bags, fill up their bags for their company to then resell them in the stores. And so you can buy the cheap brand of flour or the expensive brand of flour, but it's all because of the company that's selling it, not the quality of the flour, because it's the same exact flour. It's just different companies buy the flour to sell it in their packaging. And so if Canadians understood that, they would buy the cheap flour all the time because it's the same as the rich flour, and there's no difference in quality of the flour. Whereas here in the United States, uh, companies actually make inferior products at the lower priced option. That's where Kmart came up with their Blue Light Special. It's the product that they're wanting to promote, and it's a poor quality product. So they may sell jeans, but they don't sell Levi jeans at Kmart. I think they sell Wranglers, or did. I think they went out of business. But yeah, Kmart became associated with poor people, and so poor people were picked on in my schools because it was associated with uh, poor quality products because they couldn't afford better quality. And so the term blue light was used in an abusive uh, name-calling manner. Uh, After I graduated, my parents had notified me and said the 2002 Winter Olympics were coming to Utah. And they said there were all these business opportunities that were popping up in Utah because of the Olympics coming. And talking it over with the wife I had at the time, she said, that's fine, we can go to the United States. Turns out her real thinking, she wanted to stay in Canada and have an isolated homestead like she grew up in, with a white picket fence and her own car so that she can travel and do shopping. And so when we came to the States, I had her student loans that I was paying and my student loans that I was paying. But I got a job the very first day I went out and looked. Full-time job. It was during the Christmas season, beginning the Christmas season, so there was overtime that was involved to handle the rush and orders. But it was minimum wage, though it did have a great benefits package. It took out a lot from my paycheck, which was minimum wage, so I had less than minimum wage to spend. But my parents put me up in their new suburban home basement, because that's what my parents do. They move only to new suburban housing. But the only problem is that when we got to Utah, my parents were not in their house yet. They deceived us. And it's because of the alt-right thinking of needing to control others. A grown man, married, own family, but my parents, specifically my mom, wanted to keep control of me. And alt-right conservative thinkers say, oh, that's just a mother's love. She just cares for you, wants what's best for you. No. She wants me controlled so that I conform to her way of thinking, her way of doing things. So my having gotten a degree in biblical studies and philosophy of science with a minor in biblical Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, if they had known that that's my education, they would have been opposed. And they were when they found out the job that I had. Because the job that I had, even though it was a full-time job with overtime, great benefits, I still wasn't able to get out on my own, get my own house for the family, get a car for me and the wife so that she can go shopping with an unlimited supply of money to go shopping with. I was then the evil person. And they, like I mentioned in the previous video about the church, the family proclamation was used to justify their position of dislike of my path in life. I was not giving my family their own home, with my wife with her own vehicle, and an unlimited shopping supply of money for shopping. And therefore I was disobedient to the church and to the alt-right agenda. And then the punishment came. The wife I had at the time got upset with me one evening, slammed the door on me and our 2 young children as we were going to go for a walk. My dad heard the slamming of the door, and because of his alt-right conversion, assumed that I was the one who got angry and slammed the door. I had no history of violence. No history of violence. But when you see what my dad did and what he eventually reported to the police, you see his alt-right agenda emerging. And my first wife never admitted that it was her until after the action was done that let her get away with it. Then she confessed that it was her that slammed the door. I never beat my wife. She beat me, but I did not beat her back in retaliation for her beating me. She was so tiny and weak that she didn't hurt me, so I didn't report it. But now I realize that with an alt-right governing body, you have to document everything that is done to you, everything that you do, so that you can protect yourself when they attack you. And they will attack you. And so with James Comey talking about recording his conversation with Trump, and even coming out about Rosenstein talking about, well, wear a wire when you go talk with Trump, they understand when you're dealing with alt-right conservatives, they want you silenced. They do not want records of what they do and what they decide. And all records they want secret. So when Trump says that LLCs can now obtain money from anywhere in the world and not have to report it, that's part of the alt-right agenda. And the church, the Mormon church, followed suit, got their own LLCs started. They're now funneling money from foreign governments through these LLCs into the stock market. It was leaked that at least $30 billion are being funneled through these LLCs of the church. And the church pushed the legislature of Utah to sign a bill to make it a crime to record another party without their consent. Because the church was having leaked recordings that were exposing the church's corruption. And so the church pushed the Utah government to ban those types of communication recordings. So you can see how it all comes into play. They make laws to protect themselves, who are the governing body, who control people. They need to be protected to stay in control. And they blame the victims who are just trying to protect themselves from further abuse. They call them the criminals. And that's what was done to me. And so my dad, thinking I slammed the door and was being abusive, took my wife and kids to my sister's house. I had no idea where they were. He then kicked me out of the house when my mom came down and threatened me with the family proclamation of the LDS Church, saying that I needed to conform to the family proclamation, that I am in the wrong. She didn't go into details. She didn't explain what it was that I was doing wrong, but we all knew it had to do with finances. The bishop of our local congregation, called a ward in the LDS Church, he aided and abetted. He told me I had to quit my job, my full-time job, where I worked overtime, where I had great benefits. I had to quit it because it wasn't good enough to qualify for the family proclamation. A bishop interfering and telling me I had to quit my job. He released me from my church responsibilities, which we call callings, because he didn't want me influencing anybody in the church. And the stake president, well, that came later, but yeah, I was attacked by my family, by my religion, and by my dad taking my wife away to a secure location, as he believed she needed to be protected from me, when it was she who was the one that was violent. That gave her the opening she was waiting for. That's why she was complaining about the marriage to anyone who would listen, hoping that someone would open the way for her to justify kidnapping and fleeing the country with my kids. Our kids, but whatever. In Utah, they had set it up so that couples can't get divorced easily. You have to go through at least a year of couples therapy. And my first wife knew that. She had done her research on how to get away with what she was going to do. She had premeditatedly planned all of it. So when my dad gave her the opening, boom, there it was. And she went to Canada. That's where she's from. She had dual citizenship, and we were able to get our kids dual citizenship as a result. But that allowed her to flee to Canada and cross the border because she's a Canadian, and therefore they would never know that she was kidnapping kids when she got to the border. And because there was a conspiratorial attack on me, I had no one to go to. When my dad kicked me to the streets, because, you know, I had to yell to get my mom to stop attacking me. with the family proclamation. And all I said loudly was, "Leave me alone. Get out of my room." That was it. But my dad heard my raised voice, and I could hear him tromp across the floor upstairs. And I knew that there was going to be another contention. My dad had been abusive to me in the past, and I knew what was coming, and I didn't want to be a part of it. And so I left the house and then snuck back in later on. And on the Wednesday, he cornered me and kicked me out of the house. And the bishop also happened to be there also, and the bishop threatened me with a religious curse. He cursed me to hell. The religious leader cursed me to hell for what? Because my wife at the time had been premeditatively planning to divorce me and steal the kids from me? That my parents aided and abetted? That he aided and abetted? But there was the alt-right conservative thinking. I was the one to blame when I was the victim. So when I'm walking the streets, I walked in the wrong neighborhood, because this particular neighborhood had been victim by robbers who had stolen tools from some of the houses in that neighborhood. And I didn't know it. I was just walking because I was no longer allowed in home. And so they cornered me and demanded I show them my ID, which I refused, because I'm not showing my ID to other people. You know, what are they going to do about it? You know, but they called the cops on me and were sure that I was the one stealing their tools, and therefore I needed to be accountable for my actions. You see how that all works? You'll watch any of the news channels here in Utah, the local news. Every night there will be an arrest made by the police, because the Salt Lake County Jail alone takes in 3,000 arrests per month. Them alone. So, yeah, there will be an arrest story in the news every single day. Listen to what the reporters say about it. And they're just quoting the police, but the press is encouraging it and egging it on upon the viewers. When a person is arrested, the reporters announce without fail whether that person is cooperating or not cooperating with police. Have you ever read the Constitution? The Bill of Rights? Are you familiar with the Miranda rights? We are guaranteed to have a lawyer defend us in a trial at court. But yet, police, especially here in Utah, violate our constitutional rights. And even Utah law has laws specifically designed to empower police to violate our constitutional rights. You can go to the Utah Law Code at the Utah website, government website. They don't care about our rights. It's about them. 98% of all arrests in Utah never go to trial. Whether innocent or guilty, nobody goes to trial unless you're high profile. That's the alt-right conservative thinking. You're guilty by accusation. And that's what I was faced when I was kicked out of the house. I told the police when they came, showed them my ID. They laughed at me when I said that my wife and children are missing. I don't know where they are. They laughed at me because I didn't take my car and go driving. I was out walking the streets instead. So they laughed at me. I was still in shock from the abuse. The police should have known that. But instead, their alt-right thinking accused me. See, it's a competition in Utah. You know, the man has to enforce himself. You know, people used to talk about when growing up that you beat your wife to subject her to your will. That's how a family is supposed to be run. The man rules. The woman must obey the husband. So you beat her if she gets out of line. And that's what it's like in other religions around the world. As I'm watching Jack Ryan, that has Muslim women. You know, Utah thinks of women the same way that Islam thinks of their women. And Mormon women don't stand up against it because that's their religion. Just like Muslim women don't stand up against Islam because that's their religion. They're raised to believe it's run by God, and so that if they violate the man, they're violating God, and that they will be punished for it. And there's punishment for it. The beating and the inability to redress grievances, the inability to protest. People are forced into silence with extortion and fear. So the police did not help me when I reported the kidnapping, when I reported the abandonment. They ignored it. They took me to the Provo area where they were intending to drop me off at the shelter that was there. I didn't go to the shelter. I knew that was a waste of my time. My life, I figured, was over. I had nothing. I was separated. I was kicked out from my family, from my property. So I just wandered the streets. I expected to die from starvation. The next day, a highway patrol officer pulled over to stop me and says, "You can't walk here." And I said, "Well, where can I walk?" And he said, "Well, probably the old highway out yonder." And I had no idea where it was. And he realized something was off because I didn't look like the kind of troublemaker. I didn't look like a poor person, a homeless person. So he profiled me and, in essence, saved my life with his profiling. And he was Mormon because he revealed that he had just seen the April General Conference earlier that month. and tried to talk about families and God, and called my parents, and my parents gave him the line of, "Oh, we didn't know where he was. We didn't know what happened. We're innocent." And so when I talked to them on the phone, I said, "I'm not coming back if you're going to continue to treat me like this. You need to back off and leave me alone." And of course they promised, so that they can reel me back in to eventually work their way to controlling me again. That's how it works. They deceive in order to control. Just like Trump, when all that pressure came out about locking babies in cages, he pretended to reverse his decision and fooled everybody. Trump gave in. No, he didn't give in. He just wrote a new law saying that now babies can be locked indefinitely with their parents in cages. So instead of separating kids, now they keep them together with their families, but now they're indefinitely detained forever. And so I'm going to have to make this a part 2 for this discussion of what happened to me. But that's the background for what I'm about to talk about next, because the Utah government did not give up on trying to control me, because I did not sit quiet and allow my first wife to get away with what she did. I tried to petition for a redress of grievances and tried to protest by using a petition for a redress of grievances, and the government of Utah attacked again. So that's next.